touchdown, Alabama, let's get it.
The process, no one can stop this. Hottest show in the streets, I bet you can't top this. Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
The process.
Hey everyone, welcome back into a new week of The Process, Crimson Tide Recruiting. I am your host, Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama. Thank you guys so much for joining me today on our YouTube page. If you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button below, leave a like. If you are a subscriber, hit that notification bell so you can be notified when we drop content on our YouTube page. I am here each week to break down the latest in Crimson Tide football recruiting news, so be sure to hit that subscribe button so you guys can stay updated on everything Alabama football recruiting with TouchdownAlabama.com. On today's episode of the show, I do want to discuss a lot of the coaching changes that have happened over the last couple of days. We see a lot of big-time coaches taking jobs at notable programs, and I want to take a look at that and how that could possibly impact Alabama's recruiting efforts, because a lot of the top programs in college football go after the same prospects in each recruiting classes. With these coaching changes happening all over the place, I do want to discuss how this could have an impact on the Crimson Tide's 2022 recruiting efforts. So I will talk a lot about that today on today's show, but I do want to discuss just a quick recruiting update, something I think Alabama fans need to know about, and that is the fact that several Crimson Tide commits will participate in state championships in their respective state this week. The Crimson Tide's 5-star linebacker commit Jeremiah Alexander will get things started with Thompson High School in Birmingham, Alabama, as they will participate in the 7A state championship game on Wednesday night against Central Phoenix City High School. Phoenix City actually has a couple of Alabama targets on their team as well, so that is a game I think Alabama fans need to watch if you have an opportunity to check out that matchup. The Crimson Tide will have targets on each side of the football, so be sure if you get an opportunity to watch that 7A state championship game inside Protective Stadium in Birmingham, Alabama. The Crimson Tide's 5-star quarterback commit Ty Simpson will also compete in a state championship as well this week. On Saturday, Westview High School will compete in the Tennessee 2A state championship. Ty Simpson has led Westview High School to a state championship for the first time in 20 years. So Westview has not had an opportunity to go to the state championship game since 2001. So Ty Simpson making some history at Westview High School before he enrolls at the University of Alabama in the future. The Crimson Tide's 4-star defensive lineman commit Jaheim Otis will also participate in a state championship game this week, as Columbia High School will participate in the 4A state championship inside the state of Mississippi. So a couple of Crimson Tide commits will be active in state championship games, trying to get a trophy before they make the move in the next step of their football journey, which will most likely be at the University of Alabama once they sign a national letter of intent to play football there. But that is the quick recruiting update I wanted to provide. Now I am going to switch my full attention to the multiple coaching changes that have happened this week, and we pull up a graphic here. Of course, this graphic was designed by our producer here at TouchdownAlabama.com, John Ivory. We are so lucky to have him. But looking at that graphic, you see some of those big coaching changes that I have spoken of, and those guys are Lincoln Riley choosing to go from Oklahoma to USC. You also have Billy Napier choosing to go from Louisiana to Florida. And lastly, you have Brian Kelly making a major move, going from Notre Dame to LSU. A bit of a surprising move. I wouldn't say a bit of a surprise move, a totally surprising move considering what he has been able to build at Notre Dame. But there are so many storylines to watch and just pay attention to that could possibly impact Alabama's recruiting efforts when you take a look at these coaching changes. Just starting with Lincoln Riley. And the biggest impact I think that this could have on Alabama's recruiting efforts with him going from Oklahoma to USC is Damani Jackson, the 5-star defensive back who decommitted from the Trojans, mainly citing that he decommitted from USC because of the uncertainty about their head coaching position. But now they have Lincoln Riley, an established head coach who had a lot of success at Oklahoma, Jackson may give USC another look. That is something to pay attention to. Of course, the Crimson Tide are considered to be in a great position with Jackson leading into National Signing Day, but the Michigan Wolverines are also a player in Jackson's recruitment. With Lincoln Riley taking his talents to USC, I will pay attention to Damani Jackson to see how that impacts his recruitment, because he was committed to USC for a couple of months after Clay Helton was let go by the program. That just showed his loyalty and just his relationship that he did have with their coaching staff. And a lot of those coaches may still be on USC's coaching staff. It is unsure how many coaches Lincoln Riley will bring from Oklahoma to USC. Looks as if he may keep his defensive coordinator, which could impact Damani Jackson's situation. That is just something to pay attention to. I still feel Alabama's in a great position with the 5-star defensive back, but with Lincoln Riley choosing to go to USC, you can bet all of your money on the fact that he will try to push for Damani Jackson to get him possibly back in the fold for the Trojans. But with Lincoln Riley leaving Oklahoma, just transitioning to their recruiting efforts at Oklahoma, specifically in the 2022 recruiting class, I feel Alabama is not really targeting a lot of their commits at the moment. But I think the guy who may catch your eye is the 4-star offensive tackle Jake Taylor, who officially visited the University of Alabama during the summer. He stands at 6'4", 290 pounds. He's a really great tackle. The Crimson Tide will possibly look at him in this 2022 recruiting class. It wouldn't be surprising if they did possibly pick up their push for Taylor with Lincoln and Riley going to USC, because the Crimson Tide have shown that they want to add another offensive lineman to this 2022 recruiting class. They've hosted a couple of different offensive linemen in recent weeks, so Jake Taylor is a guy I would just take a look at if anybody was to possibly flip from Oklahoma to Alabama at the moment. So that is a guy to just keep your eyes on. But I think the biggest impact of Lincoln Riley choosing to leave Oklahoma in terms of impacting Alabama's recruiting efforts is that 2023 recruiting class, with Oklahoma having commitments from a couple of 5-stars in that class. A lot of those guys have backed off their commitment to Oklahoma, including Brandon Ennis, also Malachi Nelson. Both of those guys have Alabama offers. Brandon Ennis is one of the top wide receivers in the 2023 recruiting class, and I feel Alabama is going to continue to go after him. Even if he was committed to Oklahoma by this time next year, I'm pretty sure Alabama would still be heavily involved in this recruitment. So those are the storylines in terms of Lincoln Riley. But also looking at Billy Napier taking the job at Florida, leaving Louisiana Lafayette, that is something to definitely keep your eyes on as well. With him going to Florida, of course, Alabama and Louisiana Lafayette are not fighting for any 2023 recruits heading down the stretch, but the Crimson Tide have a couple of mutual targets with the Gators, including 2 guys who decommitted from Florida in Shemar James and Isaiah Bond. Those are 2 guys who I feel Billy Napier and his coaching staff would definitely try to get back on board. They have visited both guys, since coaches now have an opportunity to take in-home visits to a lot of their top prospects and a lot of their top targets to see them in person in their own home. Of course, the Alabama's coaching staff is not doing this heavily at the moment because they are focused on the SEC championship, but Florida's coaching staff is already hitting the road. Like I said, they have already visited Isaiah Bond and Shemar James, trying to get them back in the fold at Florida. And of course, Alabama is still targeting those guys in the 2022 recruiting class. It will be interesting to see how Billy Napier impacts their recruitment, possibly getting them to commit back. So that is something to definitely keep your eyes on. Looking at Isaiah Bond, he visited Alabama recently. When I interviewed him, he said he had a special place in his heart for the Crimson Tide. A lot of people feel the Crimson Tide are the favorite heading into National Signing Day. Will Billy Napier and his coaching staff possibly impact Isaiah Bond's decision? That is something that we definitely will have to watch, and definitely will have to see if that develops. But also just taking a look at some guys who have never been committed to either the Florida Gators or the Crimson Tide. We can take a look at a guy like Quincy Wiggins, the 4-star defensive end out of Louisiana. The Crimson Tide and the Gators are both targeting him. It'll be interesting to see if Billy Napier can just capitalize on the progress and the momentum that I feel that the Florida Gators have built with Wiggins throughout his recruitment, possibly get a commitment from him, but the Crimson Tide are still heavily involved in this recruitment as well. With him being a Louisiana native, I think we can easily make a transition to another school he is considering, that is the LSU Tigers, who hired Brian Kelly from Notre Dame. With Kelly leaving Notre Dame to go to LSU, we all know the battles that the Tide and the Tigers have on the recruiting trail each and every year. The Crimson Tide like to target guys from the state of Louisiana, and with the talent the state of Alabama is scheduled and set to produce over the next couple of recruiting classes, I expect LSU to be very active inside the state of Alabama in the near future as well. But specifically looking at the 2022 recruiting class, there is actually quite a bit of guys to pay attention to, including 4-star wide receiver Shaz Preston out of St. James High School in Louisiana. Preston currently has the Crimson Tide, the Tigers, Georgia, and Texas listed in his top 4. He visited the Crimson Tide earlier in the season after visiting them a couple of times during the summer. Had an opportunity to talk with his dad after a couple of those visits, and he told me that their family really respects the Alabama football program, what they have been able to build under Nick Saban, and things that they have in place to help their students achieve big things on and off the football field, their student athletes, of course. So the Crimson Tide are currently in a great position. With Preston, I feel that they are in a position to possibly land him in the future, but LSU is not going to go out quietly with Preston being an in-state kid. Although the LSU Tigers were not having the best season, they were still included in his top 4, so he is a kid I think they will definitely try to pull in this 2022 recruiting class. I expect Brian Kelly to try to push for him, possibly pull him into the fold for them in these 2022 recruiting class as well. So Preston is just a member of this. I feel a long list of recruits who the Tigers and the Tide are pushing for heading into National Signing Day. You also have to take a look at guys like Wiggins, of course, Kendrick Law, Jacoby Matthews, who's once verbally committed to the Tigers, Austin Osbury, a 4-star defensive back out of University Lap High School in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So LSU and Alabama are going to consistently fight for some of the top targets inside the entire country, but specifically inside the state of Louisiana the most, which is something that we have seen a lot in the past. It will be interesting to see how these battles progress with Nick Saban and Brian Kelly going head up on the recruiting trail, with Kelly trying to turn the LSU program back around, get them back on track to being a winning program. But with these coaching changes, you also have 2 programs without head coaches. Those programs are Oklahoma and Notre Dame. I talked about how Oklahoma head coaching vacancy could impact Alabama's recruiting efforts when you take a look at Oklahoma commits, but you also have to take a look at Notre Dame commits, specifically a 4-star defensive back out of Naples, Florida, a guy who I've talked about in the process a couple of times in the past. I think we had a whole show just focused on the fact that Nick Saban really likes this kid, and he is 4-star defensive back Devin Moore, a lengthy defensive back with Nick Saban compared to Pat Surtain. So the Crimson Tide really like this kid. They hosted him for an unofficial visit during the summer, and he said that he loved that visit. He said he loved that place. That is just his exact words. I love that place, and he felt that Alabama was in a top position after that visit. With Brian Kelly choosing to depart from Notre Dame and go to LSU, Devin Moore has decommitted from the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and his recruitment is completely back open. He's definitely a prospect where I feel is going to consider the Crimson Tide just based on how much interest they showed in him in the earlier part of his recruitment. Sort of surprised me when he committed to Notre Dame over Alabama. I felt the Crimson Tide were in a good position with him after that unofficial visit. They showed a lot of interest ever since they offered him. Nick Saban was very involved in his recruitment as well, in constant contact with them, calling him on the phone, having a lot of different conversations with Moore, trying to get him on campus during the summer. But he did commit to the Fighting Irish, and the Crimson Tide have continued to push for the Naples, Florida product. And with him opening his recruitment back up, I feel that his decision could most likely come down to Florida and Alabama at the moment. With Brian Kelly going to LSU, I'm pretty sure he's going to try to get LSU's coaching staff to recruit him as well. So this could turn into an SEC recruiting battle heading into the latter stretch of his recruitment, heading down the home stretch of the 2022 recruiting cycle. So Devin Moore is the guy to keep your eyes on, put your eyes back on him after we basically didn't pay too much attention to him after he verbally committed to Notre Dame, but with him back on the board, back on the market, he's a name I think Alabama fans will hear a lot about. So those are the recruiting updates I wanted to provide today, specifically to talk about all of the coaching changes and how it could possibly impact Alabama's recruiting efforts with National Signing Day a couple of weeks away. A lot can happen over the next couple of weeks just based on how many things are starting to change. Of course, these coaches have accepted new head coaching jobs. Their assistant coaches have not been determined in a lot of places. That could have a huge impact on the recruiting trail. For those of you who may not know, assistant coaches play a huge role on the trail. They talk to these kids almost every day when it's time to specifically target their specific recruiting classes. So that is just something to also just continue to watch develop as new coaches continue to get announced. Specifically also looking at Oklahoma and Notre Dame, who do not have coaches at the moment. But those, like I said, are the updates I wanted to take a look at on the process. Be sure to hit that subscribe button below. Also hit that like button. If you are a subscriber, hit the notification bell so you can be notified when we drop our content on our YouTube page. Head over to touchdownalabama.com when you leave from here to pick up a subscription. With that subscription, you will be able to read all of our subscriber only articles. Then head to the Google Play Store if you have an Android device, or to the Apple App Store if you have an Apple device, to download the Touchdown Alabama app. With that app, breaking news notifications can be sent to your mobile device. As always, I am Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama.
Process.